And joining us now is California Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley. It's good to have you here. I think I should point out you're a bit of a unicorn. You are a Democrat in a heavily, you're a Republican in a heavily Democratic state. Yes, there we go, a purple district. So I'm assuming you're hearing from both sides or all sides of the political spectrum. As you take all of that in, how do you fix this, Congressman?
Yeah, I am. And this is really not a partisan thing. Like, I think that just all Americans are incredibly frustrated and just really exasperated with the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. People are saying, you know, are you kidding me? Like, Congress's main job is to give us the government that we, the taxpayers, are paying for. And you can't even do that. In fact, Congress hasn't passed a budget of any form since March of last year. And now we can't even get a 7-week extension for the existing budget to have this continuing resolution to keep things going. And to make things even worse, at this point, all the attention, all the focus in D.C. seems to be on trying to blame the other side for the shutdown, as opposed to trying to work together to end the shutdown and actually give the American people what they paid for.
Well, would it have been helpful for you and your colleagues to be in town? The Speaker made a decision to keep you out of town this week.
I think it would be. I mean, today is a Jewish holiday. We weren't supposed to be here today, but we should have been here this week. Absolutely, we should have been here this week for a couple of reasons. I mean, you know, you could argue, yes, we in the House did pass a bill to keep the government open. I voted to keep the government open. And by the way, I've done that during the Biden administration. I've done it during the Trump administration. Government shutdowns are an absolute institutional failure of government, of Congress, that we need to avoid. You know, even if the Senate had come to some sort of deal and passed another version of a CR, the House would need to be in town in order to ratify that, in order for it to keep the government open. Or even if the Senate had passed the version of the CR that we passed and we avoided a shutdown, it's only a 7-week funding extension. So the bills are going to come due in another 7 weeks, where we have to actually have passed 12 appropriation bills that set the entire budget for the next year. And so we haven't managed to do that for the last year and a half. We now have 7 weeks to finish the job, so I'm not sure why we're canceling session days. So yes, I was very frustrated that we were not in session this week.
Well, let's talk about the impact, particularly on health care, even if you don't necessarily agree with the way Democrats are going about this. Do you agree that the risk to Americans' health care premiums is great? Are they paying the price, literally and figuratively, for Congress's inability to get things done?
Absolutely. And, I'm very concerned about the notion that my constituents could see a big increase in healthcare premiums. And I know that there are people on both sides of the aisle who are very concerned about that. And so there is going to need to be a deal on these ACA subsidies. And so the position we're hearing right now is that we're not going to negotiate that during the shutdown, but we have to have a deal there eventually. So if we can reach a deal now and then get the government back open more quickly at the same time, I'm not sure why we should pursue that, which is my criticism of Chuck Schumer, is that if he's going to take the position that in order to grant this final 7-week funding extension, then there's, certain things that he wants to be able to deliver and that he wants Republicans to work with him on, then that's fine if that's his position, but he hasn't made reasonable requests up to this point in time. He wanted to repeal large portions of a landmark bill that just passed. But on this issue of the ACA subsidies, or maybe there are some other issues like rescissions, I've thrown out the idea of maybe this is a time to come together to end this terrible redistricting war that's taking place across the country. If these areas provide some measure of common ground that we can come together on and then use that to create the momentum to reopen the government as quickly as possible, then I don't know why we shouldn't be exploring all of those opportunities. But right now, the two sides are just yelling at each other rather than talking to each other.
And caught in the middle are federal employees, among others, right? I think no state has more federal employees than California, about 150,000. I'm guessing more than a few of them are in your district, certainly around Sacramento, right? And there are other things. I mean, it's been very clear from the president that he's going to be targeting Democratic states. He's already hit New York and New Jersey. Director Vogt says funding will be canceled for green energy programs, including in California. So what are you telling your constituents, and what are they telling you?
Well, I'm telling them first and foremost that I voted to keep the government open. I voted to avoid a government shutdown, and I've done that regardless of who the president is. And I think that Congress needs to, as a whole, needs to, at this point, realize that we are failing the American people when the government shuts down. So I think that the important thing right now is that we stop trying to blame one side or the other, because even, let's say, hypothetically, that Republicans succeed in showing that Chuck Schumer is 100% to blame for the shutdown, which is, we did pass on the House side a resolution to keep the government open, and the Senate hasn't passed it. But let's say that we do succeed in showing, and the American people believe that Chuck Schumer is 100% to blame. That doesn't give Schumer an incentive to reopen the government. It gives Schumer an incentive to try to change the narrative. And so what we need to be doing is trying to actually look at, okay, what are the bounds of a reasonable negotiation that can take place there? What concrete steps can we take to have that negotiation and actually get the government open, not in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but really it should happen in a matter of days.
And should the White House be going after Democratic projects, Democratic leaders, Democratic states?
Well, look, this has happened in prior shutdowns as well. Whoever's in charge tries to use the discretion they have in order to push the narrative in their favor and to apply political pressure to get a resolution to the situation. Personally, I think that, and frankly, from a blue state, that kind of is not something that I want to see. But in general, I mean, we want to minimize the amount of pain that the American people feel. This is not their fault. This is a failure of their politicians to actually reach the most basic of agreements and to perform the most basic of tasks. And the consequences could be very far-reaching because of this government shutdown. We're talking about many, many federal workers that are getting furloughed. We're talking about members of our military who are maybe missing paychecks, and TSA agents and air traffic controllers. We're talking about critical services not being available, national parks and museums not being open. This is not a good thing in any way, shape, or form. It's not good for anyone, not good for Democrats, not good for Republicans, not good for the American people. And it only serves to further and exacerbate the disillusion and frustration that so many people have in Washington, D.C. So we need to get this fixed ASAP.
Well, what you just said, I think, is something that pretty much everybody watching can agree on. Congressman Kevin Kiley, we do appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.